Welcome to Untold Whispers. I'm your narrator tonight, here to share a story both haunting and peaceful. Take a deep breath, dim the lights, let the night settle in. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more quiet chills. Tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's still awake with me tonight. I've been living in college dorms for 2 years now, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened during my junior year. When I first met my randomly assigned roommate, I thought I'd lucked out. He was quiet, kept to himself, and seemed like the perfect study companion. He'd spend hours at his desk with headphones on, barely making a sound. I remember thinking how easy this year was going to be compared to my last roommate, who threw parties every weekend. The first few weeks were completely normal. We established a routine. He'd wake up early, I'd sleep in a bit longer, and we'd rarely cross paths except for late-night study sessions. He never brought friends over, never played loud music, never left a mess. Honestly, it was almost too perfect. But I wasn't complaining. After the chaos of sophomore year, I welcomed the peace and quiet. Things started feeling off around October. Small things at first, things I could easily dismiss. I'd wake up and find my phone, charging cable unplugged and coiled differently than I'd left it. My phone would be face down on my desk when I always left it face up. Books I'd stacked in a certain order would be rearranged. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness. Maybe I was more tired than I realized from all the studying. But deep down, something felt wrong, like invisible fingers had been rifling through my life while I slept. Then I started noticing my belongings in slightly different positions. My backpack's zipper would be open when I distinctly remembered closing it. The notebook I kept by my bed would be on the opposite nightstand. My jacket hung inside out in the closet. Each incident was small enough to doubt myself, but together they created this unsettling pattern I couldn't ignore. One night in late October, I woke up around 3 a.m. needing water. The room was dark, except for the glow from my roommate's desk lamp. He had his back to me, hunched over something, completely absorbed. I didn't think much of it. He often studied late. But as I passed his desk on my way back from the bathroom, I noticed he quickly minimized something on his laptop screen. The brief second before it disappeared, I could have sworn I saw my face on his monitor. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a group project photo or something innocent. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew rapidly over the following weeks. The breaking point came in mid-November when I needed to print an essay. Our dorm had a shared wireless printer that both our laptops connected to. I sent my document to print, but instead of my essay, dozens of photos started printing out. Photos of me, sleeping in my bed from different angles, sitting at my desk studying, eating cereal in the morning, getting dressed, though thankfully my back was turned. The printer just kept going, page after page, until I frantically unplugged it. My hands were shaking as I gathered the photos. There had to be at least 50 printed before I stopped it, which meant there were probably hundreds more in whatever folder they came from. Each photo had a timestamp in the corner. They spanned weeks, some from September, others from just days ago. The angles suggested they'd been taken from his side of the room, probably with his phone or laptop camera positioned carefully. I felt sick, violated. How long had this been going on? How many photos were there that didn't print? I wanted to confront him immediately, but he was in class. Instead, I did something I'm not proud of, but felt completely justified doing. I searched his side of the room. Under his mattress, I found a spiral notebook. My stomach dropped as I opened it. Page after page of entries about me, written in meticulous detail. 7:42 a.m. Woke up, checked phone for 6 minutes. 7:48 a.m. Went to bathroom. 8:03 a.m. Left room wearing blue hoodie and jeans. Spoke to someone in hallway. Couldn't hear conversation clearly. 8:47 a.m. Returned with coffee. It went on like this for pages. Timestamps of when I came and went. Descriptions of what I wore each day. notes about who I talked to, how long I was on phone calls, what I ate, when I showered, when I turned my lights off at night. He'd been documenting my entire existence like I was some kind of research subject. But that wasn't even the worst part. Tucked into the back of the notebook were observations that made my blood run cold. Seems stressed about midterms. Stays up later now. Called mom 3 times this week. Relationship issues. Received package yesterday. Didn't open it yet. Wonder what's inside. He was analyzing me, trying to understand my emotional state, my relationships, my private life. I sat on his bed, notebook in my trembling hands, trying to decide what to do. That's when I noticed the shoebox on his closet shelf, partially hidden behind textbooks. Something told me I needed to look inside. I wish I hadn't. The box was filled with items from my trash, crumpled receipts I'd thrown away. He'd apparently smoothed them out and organized them by date. Torn up notes from classes. A birthday card I'd received and discarded. Used coffee cups with my lipstick prints on them, carefully preserved in plastic bags. An old shopping list in my handwriting. Even strands of hair, long ones that could only have come from my hairbrush. He'd been collecting pieces of me, building some kind of archive of my existence. When he returned that evening, I was sitting on my bed with everything laid out, the photos, the notebook, the shoebox contents. He froze in the doorway when he saw it all. "We need to talk," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. He closed the door calmly, like he'd been expecting this. Then he sat down at his desk, turned his chair to face me, and smiled. Not a sheepish or apologetic smile, just calm, normal. The scariest part wasn't what he'd done. It was how normal he looked while explaining it. "It's a project," he said simply. "I'm documenting human behavior patterns in natural environments. You're my primary subject. I have approval from my psychology professor, though obviously the ethical board doesn't know the full scope." "This isn't a project," I interrupted, my voice rising. "This is stalking. This is illegal." He shook his head like I was missing the point. "You're not understanding the scientific value. Do you know how rare it is to get completely unfiltered data about someone's daily patterns? Usually people modify their behavior when they know they're being observed. But you've been completely natural, authentic." He talked about it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, like I should be honored to be his primary subject. He even offered to show me his findings, charts and graphs he'd made, tracking my sleep patterns, social interactions, and mood fluctuations based on his observations. I grabbed my phone and told him I was going to the RA immediately. He didn't try to stop me, just shrugged and said, "You signed a housing agreement. Technically, I have as much right to document our shared space as you do." The RA's response was swift once I showed the evidence. Campus police were called. My parents drove 4 hours that same night. By morning, I was granted an emergency room change, and he was removed from campus housing pending investigation. The worst part came a week later, when the RA pulled me aside. "You should know," she said quietly. "We looked into his housing history. You're the 3rd roommate to report this exact behavior. The other 2 transferred schools. We didn't know because the complaints went through different RAs and were never connected. 3 victims. He'd perfected his system. And somewhere out there, he probably found another roommate to document. I still check my room obsessively. Still cover my laptop camera. Still wonder if someone's watching, collecting pieces of me I'll never get back. Some privacy, once violated, never quite feels restored. I never thought I'd be the type of person to find a roommate on Craigslist, but after graduation, my budget left me with limited options. The apartment was perfect, affordable, close to my new job, and my potential roommate seemed completely normal when we met. He was friendly, worked in tech, had good references, and the place was already furnished. I signed the lease the same day. The first month was honestly great. We had similar schedules, split groceries fairly, and he was surprisingly clean for a guy living alone. He'd occasionally mention his childhood friend who lived across town, someone he'd grown up with. But I never thought much of it. Friends visit, that's normal. What wasn't normal was how those visits happened. The first time I woke up to a stranger in our apartment, my heart nearly exploded. It was 3:47 a.m. according to my phone, and I'd gotten up for water. There, standing in our kitchen with the refrigerator door open, was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, thin, wearing a hoodie despite it being summer. He looked at me like my presence was the unusual thing, not his. I screamed. My roommate came rushing out, surprisingly calm, and introduced the man as his childhood friend. He has boundary issues, my roommate explained apologetically. Doesn't really grasp appropriate visiting hours. I've been trying to work on it with him. The friend, I'll call him the visitor since I was never given his actual name, just stood there eating our leftover pizza, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd broken into our apartment at nearly 4 a.m. How did he get in? I demanded. Oh, I gave him a spare key years ago, for emergencies. I should have made him take that key back immediately. That was my first mistake, trusting that this was just an isolated incident, a quirky friendship dynamic that didn't concern me, but it kept happening. Once or twice a week, I'd wake up to sounds in the apartment, the front door opening, footsteps, the TV turning on at low volume. Always between 3 and 4 a.m., like he had some internal alarm set for the worst possible hour. My roommate always had excuses. He works weird hours. He gets insomnia and doesn't want to be alone. He's going through a rough time. Each explanation made a twisted kind of sense, and I felt bad for being annoyed. Maybe I was being insensitive to someone's mental health struggles. But then the notes started. The first one I found on the kitchen counter, scrawled on the back of a receipt. You should lock your bedroom door at night. It's safer. No signature, but I knew who'd left it. My stomach turned. Why would I need to lock my door in my own apartment? Was that a threat or concern? The line between a warning and a threat is thinner than you think, especially when it comes from someone who shouldn't be in your home to begin with. A few days later, another note, this time tucked under my car's windshield wiper. Saw you at the coffee shop on Market Street. You should try the vanilla latte. He was following me, watching my routines. I confronted my roommate, who dismissed it as the friend being socially awkward and trying to be friendly. He needs to stop coming here, I said firmly. And he definitely needs to stop leaving me notes. It's creepy. My roommate promised to talk to him. The visits stopped for about a week, and I felt relief wash over me. Maybe the problem was solved. Then I came home early from work one day. My meeting had been canceled, and found the visitor sitting on our couch, alone. My roommate wasn't home. What are you doing here? I tried to keep my voice steady, waiting for him. He said I could hang here. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nice apartment. I like what you've done with your room. My blood went cold. You've been in my room. Just looking around, making sure everything's safe for you. I wanted to scream, to throw him out, but something about his energy made me afraid to escalate. Instead, I went to my room and locked the door, calling my roommate repeatedly until he answered. He came home within 20 minutes, and I heard them talking in low voices before the visitor finally left. He can't come here anymore when you're not home, I said. Actually, he can't come here at all. I want his key back. I'll handle it, my roommate said, but I could see the stress in his face. Something else was going on here, something he wasn't telling me. Over the next 2 weeks, I started noticing things in my room weren't quite right. My dresser drawers would be slightly open when I distinctly remembered closing them. My jewelry box had been moved an inch to the left. A book on my nightstand was face down instead of face up. Someone had been in my space, touching my things, and I knew exactly who. I bought a door lock that could only be opened from inside. I started keeping my valuables in my car. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. My roommate insisted his friend wasn't coming around anymore, but I knew better. The signs were everywhere. Fear has a way of settling into your bones slowly, until one day you realize your own home has become the place you're most afraid of. The final straw came on a Thursday night. I'd taken sleeping medication because my insomnia had gotten so bad from the anxiety. Around 4 a.m., something pulled me from that heavy, medicated sleep, some primal instinct screaming at me that something was wrong. I opened my eyes and nearly screamed. The visitor was sitting on the edge of my bed, just sitting there, in the darkness, watching me sleep. His silhouette was unmistakable against the faint light coming through my window. "What the hell are you doing?" I scrambled backward against my headboard, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. "Relax," he said calmly, like this was completely normal. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. You took medication tonight. I saw the bottle in the bathroom. I wanted to make sure you were still, breathing, okay. Get out," I screamed. "Get out of my room right now. There's no need to be upset. I'm looking out for you. Someone has to." My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911. That's when my roommate appeared in the doorway, and I saw something in his expression. Not surprise, but resignation. Like he'd known this would happen eventually. "You need to leave," he told his friend quietly. "Now." "We'll talk tomorrow," the visitor said to me, standing slowly. "When you're calmer." Then he walked out like he'd just stopped by for coffee. I packed a bag that night while my roommate tried to explain, tried to apologize, tried to convince me it wasn't as bad as it seemed. I called my parents at 5 a.m., and they drove 3 hours to get me. I stayed with them and broke my lease, not caring about losing my deposit. Some situations you don't negotiate with, you just escape. 2 weeks later, my former roommate finally called me. His voice was quiet, defeated. "I need to tell you the truth. He's not my childhood friend. He's a dealer. I owed him money, a lot of money, and I couldn't pay. So we made an arrangement. He could use the apartment whenever he wanted, access to a clean address, a place to store things, to wait for clients. That was my payment plan." The words made me sick. "So you gave him keys to where I lived? You let him have access to me?" "I didn't think he'd bother you. I thought he'd just come and go. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But sorry doesn't erase the feeling of waking up to a stranger sitting on your bed. Sorry doesn't give you back the safety you once felt in your own home. Sorry doesn't stop the nightmares. I later found out from my landlord that the police had raided the apartment a month after I left. My former roommate got arrested for drug-related charges. The visitor was never caught. Apparently, he disappeared as soon as he knew the cops were involved. I still wake up sometimes in my new place, convinced someone's in the room. I still check every lock 3 times before bed. And I've never, ever used Craigslist again. Some doors, once open to the wrong people, can never quite close the same way again. I was thrilled when a mutual acquaintance connected me with a potential roommate. I'd been searching for weeks, and finding someone through a trusted friend felt like fate. When we met for coffee, the chemistry was instant. She loved the same bands I did, watched the same shows, even ordered the same drink, an oat milk cortado with cinnamon. "We're going to get along great," she said, and I believed her completely. The apartment was beautiful, the rent was fair, and having a roommate who actually understood my lifestyle felt like winning the lottery. She moved in 2 weeks later, and the first month was honestly perfect. We'd cook together, watch movies, share clothes occasionally. She was considerate, clean, and fun. My friends loved her. My boyfriend thought she was cool. Everything was exactly what I'd hoped for. But then I started noticing something odd. It began with small things. She'd come home from shopping wearing a sweater that looked exactly like one I owned. "I loved yours so much I had to get one," she explained with a bright smile. A week later, she bought the same jeans I'd just gotten, then the same sneakers, then the same jacket. "Great minds think alike," she'd say whenever I pointed it out, laughing it off like we were just 2 friends with similar taste. And maybe that's all it was at first. Maybe I was being paranoid. Lots of people shop at the same stores, right? But imitation stops being flattery when it starts feeling like replacement. Then she changed her hair. I'd just gotten a major cut. Went from long hair to a shoulder-length bob with bangs. It was a big change, something I'd been planning for months. 3 days later, she came home with the exact same haircut. Same length, same style, same bangs. She even went to a different salon across town to get it, like she'd researched specifically how to replicate my look. I was so inspired by yours, she gushed. It looks so good on you, I thought. Why not try it? I forced a smile, but my stomach felt tight. This was beyond coincidence now. Over the next few weeks, the mirroring intensified. She started using the same phrases I used, laughing the same way I did, even adopting my hand gestures when she talked. She'd order the same meals as me at restaurants. She bought the same brand of coffee I drank, the same skincare products, the same books I was reading. My boyfriend noticed it too. It's kind of weird, right? He whispered to me one night after she'd spent an hour talking to us using expressions that were distinctly mine. Like she's studying you. That word, studying, sent a chill through me, because that's exactly what it felt like. Then she started showing up at my workplace. The first time she claimed she'd been in the neighborhood and wanted to grab lunch. The second time she said she'd had a meeting nearby. By the fourth time, I couldn't pretend it was coincidental anymore. My office was downtown, nowhere near anywhere she needed to be. I'm thinking about applying here, she mentioned casually one day as we sat in the building's cafe. Your company seems amazing. Do you think they're hiring in marketing? My blood went cold. I worked in marketing. I don't think that's a good idea, I said carefully. It might be awkward, working and living together. Oh, I think it would be fun. We could carpool, have lunch together every day, really spend time together. Her enthusiasm felt suffocating. I checked our company's job portal that night. She'd already submitted an application for my department, listing skills that were suspiciously similar to mine, using language from my own LinkedIn profile. There's a difference between admiration and obsession, and somewhere along the way, she'd crossed that line without me noticing. The social media situation started around the same time. She created an Instagram account with a username eerily similar to mine. Where mine was creative and nature-related, hers was a slight variation, close enough that people might confuse us. She started posting photos styled exactly like mine, using similar captions, even copying the filters and editing style I used. Then she began reposting my photos, not sharing them, downloading them, and posting them to her own account as if she'd been there. Pictures from my weekend trips, dinners with friends, moments from my life that she'd never been part of. She'd crop me out or position herself in recreated versions, building a narrative that our lives were interchangeable. My friends started getting confused. Did you get a new account? They'd ask. Some of them followed her thinking it was me. She'd respond to their comments using my voice, my humor, my way of typing. I confronted her about it. This is really bothering me. Can you please stop copying my posts? I'm not copying, she said, looking genuinely hurt. I'm just inspired by your aesthetic. Isn't that what social media is about? Sharing inspiration? But this wasn't inspiration. This was identity theft in slow motion. The breaking point started when I noticed her getting unusually interested in my boyfriend. She'd ask questions about him constantly. What he liked, where he worked, what his hobbies were. She started showing up at places we'd mentioned going to, coincidentally running into us. Then she started dating someone. When she showed me his picture, my heart sank. He looked disturbingly similar to my boyfriend. Same build, same hair color, same style, even the same beard. She'd found someone who could have been his brother. Isn't he great? She beamed. I think we have the same type. No, she didn't have the same type. She was trying to recreate my relationship. I started keeping my bedroom door locked. I stopped telling her about my plans. I avoided being home as much as possible. but the apartment felt contaminated now, like she'd infected every space with her presence, her observation, her constant mimicry. The final incident happened on a Tuesday evening. I'd come home early from work, feeling sick. The apartment was supposed to be empty. She'd said she had evening plans, but as I approached my bedroom, I heard something. Movement. My door was slightly open. I pushed it wider and froze. She was standing in front of my full-length mirror, wearing my clothes. Not similar clothes, my actual clothes from my closet. My favorite dress, my jewelry, my shoes. She'd even styled her hair exactly like I'd worn mine that morning, and she was practicing my mannerisms, the way I tilted my head, the way I smiled, the way I stood. She was rehearsing being me. When she saw me in the mirror's reflection, she didn't startle or apologize. She just turned around slowly, and for a moment, looking at her was like looking at a distorted version of myself. "These look better on me anyway," she said quietly. "Don't you think?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The wrongness of the moment paralyzed me. "I've been working really hard to improve myself," she continued, adjusting my necklace around her neck, "to become the best version. And you're the best version. So why shouldn't I learn from you?" I grabbed my phone, my keys, and left. I drove to my boyfriend's apartment and didn't go back for 3 days. When I finally returned with friends to pack my things, I broke my lease, not caring about the financial hit. But she wasn't done. She called my workplace pretending to be me, trying to get information about my schedule and projects. She contacted my employer claiming there was an identity confusion and that some of my work might actually be hers. I had to file a police report, then a restraining order. Through the legal process, I learned she'd been hospitalized before for similar behavior with a previous roommate. Identity disturbance disorder, they called it. A psychological condition where someone becomes obsessed with assuming another person's identity. She's getting treatment now, supervised and medicated. I've moved twice since then, keep my social media private, and I'm careful about who I let into my life. Because I learned the hardest way that sometimes the person who seems most compatible with you is really just someone trying to become you. And there's nothing more terrifying than watching your own identity slowly stolen, piece by piece, by someone who thinks they can wear your life better than you can. I was desperate for affordable housing when I started grad school. The stipend barely covered tuition, let alone rent in a college town where landlords knew they could charge premium prices. So when I found a 2-bedroom apartment in the graduate housing complex at half the market rate, I didn't ask too many questions. My future roommate was an older guy, maybe mid-30s, going back to school for a career change. He seemed responsible, quiet, and already had the place furnished. "I work nights," he told me during our first meeting. "Security at a commercial building downtown, so I'll be gone most evenings back early morning. We probably won't see each other much." That sounded perfect to me. I needed quiet space to study, and having the apartment to myself most nights would be ideal. I moved in the following week and settled into a comfortable routine. He'd leave around 10 p.m. with his backpack, dressed in dark clothes that I assumed were his work uniform, and return around 6 a.m. We'd occasionally cross paths in the morning, exchange pleasantries, and that was it. The first month was uneventful. I focused on my coursework. He kept to his schedule, and we coexisted peacefully. Then I started noticing things. Small things at first. A laptop appeared on the kitchen table one day. Nice, expensive looking, not one I'd seen before. When I asked him about it, he said he'd bought it secondhand for school. Made sense. A week later, there was a nice watch on the bathroom counter. "Friend gave it to me," he explained. Then jewelry appeared, women's jewelry, scattered on his dresser that I could see through his open bedroom door. Necklaces, bracelets, earrings. "Buying gifts for someone?" I asked casually. "Yeah, my sister's birthday is coming up," he said without hesitation. But the items kept accumulating. Electronics mostly. Tablets, phones, gaming consoles, cameras. They'd appear for a few days, then disappear, replaced by new items. Our apartment started feeling like a rotating electronics store. When you live with someone, you notice patterns, and sometimes those patterns form a picture you really don't want to see. I convinced myself he was reselling things online, maybe as a side business. Plenty of people flipped electronics for extra cash. It wasn't my business how he made money. I had enough to worry about with my own classes and research. But then I started paying attention to his schedule. He'd leave every night around 10 p.m., but some nights he'd be back by midnight. Other nights, not until dawn. For someone working a consistent security shift, the hours seemed irregular. And his backpack, I noticed it was always nearly empty when he left, but bulging when he returned. One night, I couldn't sleep and was up around 2 a.m. making tea. I heard the apartment door open, and he came in, backpack visibly full of something. He seemed startled to see me. "Slow night?" I asked. "Yeah, got off early." He went straight to his room and closed the door. The next morning, there were 3 new laptops stacked on the dining room table. My unease was growing into something sharper, suspicion, maybe even fear. I started keeping my bedroom door locked. I made sure my own laptop and valuables were always with me or hidden, and I began watching him more carefully. That's when I noticed the tools. I needed to borrow a pen from his desk one day when he was in the shower. He'd said to help myself to office supplies if I needed them. I opened his desk drawer and froze. Lock-picking tools, dozens of them, organized neatly in a case. Next to them were papers, hand-drawn diagrams of apartment layouts, not just ours, but others in the complex. Different buildings, different floors, with notes scribbled in margins. Gone weekends, travels for work, dog, avoid. My hands were shaking as I closed the drawer. This wasn't reselling. This was something much worse. There's a moment when suspicion crystallizes into certainty. And that's when you realize you're not just living with a stranger. You're living in a crime scene. I didn't confront him. I should have gone to the police immediately, but I was terrified. What if he knew I'd seen the tools? What if he thought I'd turn him in? I was living with someone who was clearly burglarizing apartments, possibly in our own complex, and I had no idea how dangerous he might be if he felt cornered. I started making plans to move out quietly. I contacted friends about couches I could crash on, looked for new housing, tried to figure out how to break my lease without alerting him, but I wasn't fast enough. The knock on our door came on a Thursday afternoon. I was home studying, and he was sleeping after his shift. 2 police officers stood in the hallway. "We need to speak with both residents of this apartment," the older officer said, his expression grave. My stomach dropped. What's this about? There have been multiple burglaries in this complex over the past 3 months. We have reason to believe evidence may be in this unit. They had a warrant. My roommate emerged from his bedroom, and I watched his face go carefully blank as the officers explained why they were there. They searched the apartment methodically, and with each passing minute, my panic grew. They found everything in his closet. Dozens of items, laptops, tablets, jewelry, cash, even passports and credit cards. Items that clearly belonged to different people, collected over months. The officers started pulling out box after box, bag after bag, documenting everything. "This yours?" an officer asked me, holding up a woman's diamond bracelet. "No, I've never seen it before." "What about this?" "A man's expensive watch." "No." But my denials didn't stop them from questioning me. For hours. At the station, in a cold interrogation room, they asked me again and again what I knew, when I knew it, whether I'd helped, whether I'd benefited from any of the stolen items. "I swear I didn't know," I kept saying. "I thought he worked security. I thought he was reselling stuff online. I had no idea." "You never questioned where all these electronics came from." "I thought it was legitimate. I was focused on school. I barely saw him." They pulled my financial records, interviewed my professors and classmates, checked my alibi for every burglary date. The worst part was the doubt in their eyes, the clear suspicion that I had to have known, had to have been involved somehow. Being innocent doesn't protect you when you're standing in the wreckage of someone else's crimes. My roommate, meanwhile, had lawyered up immediately and wasn't talking, which made me look even more suspicious. Why was I cooperating if I was involved? Why was I answering questions? It took 3 days for them to clear me. 3 days of my life dissected, my routine questioned, my character evaluated. They finally concluded I'd been an unwitting dupe, someone he'd used for the appearance of normalcy, for the shared apartment that made him look like a regular grad student rather than a criminal. The complex evicted me anyway. The other residents didn't want me there, didn't trust me, didn't believe I hadn't known. I had to move back in with my parents 2 hours away and commute to campus. My academic performance tanked. I developed insomnia, constantly worried that police would come back, that I'd miss something, that somehow I'd still be implicated. He eventually pleaded guilty to 15 counts of burglary and received a sentence of 3 to 5 years. At his sentencing, I learned the full scope. He'd been systematically targeting apartments where he knew residents would be gone. He'd watch patterns, note schedules, pick locks in the middle of the night, and take items small enough to carry. He'd been doing it for over a year, long before I moved in. I was just convenient cover. A grad student roommate made him look legitimate, gave him a reason to be in the complex at odd hours, provided an explanation if anyone saw him around different buildings. I still have nightmares about those police interrogations, about the moment I realized my entire living situation had been a lie, about how close I came to being charged as an accomplice simply because I'd been too naive, too trusting, too focused on my own life to see what was happening right in front of me. They say ignorance is bliss, but ignorance almost cost me my freedom, my education, and my future. And that's a price I'll never forget. I was a mess after the breakup. 3 years together, gone in a single conversation, and suddenly I needed to find a new place fast since we'd shared an apartment. A coworker mentioned her friend had a spare room available immediately, clean, affordable, and the roommate was a professional woman in her 30s who seemed stable and mature. I moved in within a week, grateful for the quick solution and desperate to start rebuilding my life. She seemed perfect at first. Organized, considerate, successful in her career. She made me tea my first night there, told me to take all the time I needed to settle in, and genuinely seemed to care about my well-being. After months of relationship turbulence, her stability felt like exactly what I needed. The problems started so subtly, I didn't recognize them as problems at all. I'd put my keys on the hook by the door. I always put them on that hook, but they'd be on the kitchen counter instead. I'd leave my wallet in my purse, but find it in my jacket pocket. My phone would be in rooms I hadn't been in. Small displacements, easy to dismiss as my own distraction. I was going through a breakup, stressed about work, not sleeping well. Of course, I was forgetful. "You left your keys on the table again," she'd say gently, handing them to me. "You really should establish a routine. It helps with memory." I'd accept them, confused but not alarmed. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was more scattered than I realized. Then it escalated. I'd find my belongings in completely wrong places. My work laptop in the bathroom, my shoes in the refrigerator, my toothbrush in the kitchen drawer. Things that made no logical sense, things I couldn't possibly have done even in my most distracted state. "Are you okay?" she'd ask with concerned eyes when I'd question these impossible placements. "You've been very forgetful lately. I'm getting worried about you." The cruelest manipulation isn't making someone doubt the world. It's making them doubt themselves. I started second-guessing everything. Had I really put my toothbrush in the kitchen drawer? Was I losing my mind? The breakup had been traumatic, sure, but was it affecting me more severely than I'd realized? Then came the conversations I supposedly had, but couldn't remember. She'd say, "Remember, you're picking up groceries tonight," and I'd have no recollection of agreeing to that. Or, "Don't forget you said you'd cover my half of the utilities this month since I covered yours last month." Except I'd never borrowed money from her and couldn't remember any such conversation. I never said that. I'd protest weakly. "You did 3 days ago, right here in the kitchen. You were on your phone. Maybe that's why you don't remember. You've been so distracted lately." I'd pay anyway, not wanting to cause conflict, not trusting my own memory anymore, because what if she was right? What if I really was becoming that unreliable? She started suggesting I see a doctor. "Memory problems at your age can be serious," she'd say with theatrical concern. "Early onset dementia runs in families sometimes. Have you talked to your parents about their medical history?" The suggestion terrified me. Was something actually wrong with me? I'd lie awake at night trying to remember conversations, trying to reconstruct my days, finding gaps and uncertainties that fed my growing panic. That's when I learned she'd been talking to our mutual friends, my coworker, who'd connected us, people in our social circle, expressing concern, telling them I was really struggling and not doing well mentally, that I was concerning her with my forgetfulness and confusion. One friend pulled me aside at a coffee shop. "Hey, are you okay? I heard you've been having some issues. If you need to talk to someone, I know a good therapist." "Issues? What issues?" "Your roommate mentioned you've been really forgetful, losing things, getting confused. She's worried about you." Anger flashed through me, cutting through the self-doubt for the first time. She said that. She cares about you. We all do. There's no shame in getting help. But I wasn't the one who needed help. Something was very wrong here, and it wasn't my memory. Trust your instincts, even when someone is systematically trying to destroy them. The final straw came with the bills. Our landlord called me directly, furious, threatening eviction for unpaid rent. "This is the second month you've missed payment. One more, and you're out." "What are you talking about? My roommate handles the rent. I give her my half every month." "Well, she hasn't been paying it. And according to her, you're responsible for the full amount this month and last month." I confronted her immediately. "The landlord says we haven't paid rent in 2 months. She looked at me with perfect, practiced concern. "No, you haven't paid rent in 2 months. I've been covering for you because I know you're going through a hard time, but I can't keep doing it. You told me you'd handle it this month, remember?" "I never said that. I've been giving you my half. You've been very confused lately. I think the stress is really affecting you. Maybe you should take some time off work, see someone professional." That's when I knew, with absolute certainty, she was doing this deliberately. I went to the electronics store that afternoon and bought a hidden camera, a small one, motion activated, that I positioned on my bookshelf aimed at the common areas of our apartment. I didn't tell her. I just set it up and waited. It took less than 48 hours to catch her. The footage was damning. Her entering my room while I was at work, systematically moving my things, taking my keys from the hook and placing them in bizarre locations, going through my purse, my laptop, my personal belongings, sitting at my computer, reading my emails, my messages, and then, most chilling of all, using my phone to text my friends. I watched the video of her typing on my phone. "I've been really struggling lately, having trouble remembering things. I think something might be wrong with me. I'm scared." She sent it to multiple people, building a narrative, creating evidence of my supposed mental decline. The next clip showed her on her own phone, texting my coworker. "I'm really worried about her. She's getting worse. Forgot to pay rent again. I don't know how much longer I can cover for her like this." I felt sick watching it. This wasn't casual cruelty or simple roommate conflict. This was systematic, calculated, deliberate psychological warfare. I downloaded all the footage, made multiple copies, and confronted her that evening with my laptop open to the video. Want to explain this? Her face went through a remarkable transformation, shock, then calculation, then finally settling on dismissive amusement. It was a social experiment. I'm taking a psychology course. You were the perfect subject, vulnerable, isolated, trusting. I was documenting how easily perception can be manipulated. A social experiment. You've been torturing me for months, making me think I was losing my mind, telling people I was mentally unstable. And it worked, she interrupted, almost proud. You believed it. Everyone believed it. That's the point. People are so easy to manipulate when you know the right techniques. I moved out within 3 days, stayed with my coworker while I found a new place. I showed the video to our mutual friends, trying to clear my name, trying to undo the damage she'd done to my reputation. But some damage couldn't be undone. That job opportunity I'd been interviewing for, I didn't get it. I found out later she'd contacted my potential employer, claiming to be a concerned friend, warning them I was going through serious mental health issues and might not be reliable. I never pressed charges. My lawyer said what she'd done existed in a gray area. Awful, yes, but hard to prosecute. Harassment maybe, but proving damages was complicated. She moved on to a new roommate within a month. I sometimes wonder if she's running the same experiment on someone else. If another person is lying awake right now, wondering if they're losing their mind, not realizing they're the victim of someone who's turned psychological manipulation into a hobby. The worst part isn't what she did. It's that I still sometimes doubt my own memory. She's been gone for over a year, but the seeds of self-doubt she planted are still there, still growing, still whispering that maybe I really am forgetful, maybe I really am unreliable. That's what gaslighting does. It doesn't just make you doubt reality in the moment. It makes you doubt yourself forever. And that damage, that lasts long after the person who caused it is gone. I was so excited about the internship, a whole summer in a new city, working at a prestigious tech company, building my resume before senior year. The only problem was housing. I'd applied too late for company housing and couldn't afford market-rate apartments. A friend of a friend knew someone subletting a room for the summer, a nursing student responsible and clean, who'd be around studying for boards. It seemed perfect for what I could afford. She was friendly when I moved in, helping me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, showing me around the neighborhood, even making dinner that first night. I'm usually pretty quiet, she said. Studying takes up most of my time, but let me know if you need anything. I'm used to taking care of people. That should have been my first warning. The way she said it, not offering help but claiming a role. The caretaker, the one in control. The first few weeks were normal. I'd leave early for my internship, come home exhausted, eat whatever was easy, and crash. She'd study at the kitchen table, surrounded by medical textbooks and notes, occasionally making us both coffee or tea. You work so hard, she'd say. You need to take care of yourself. I started feeling tired, more than tired, exhausted in a way that didn't match my activity level. Sure, the internship was demanding, but I was 21 years old and used to long days. This was different. A bone-deep fatigue that made every movement feel like wading through water. You should sleep more, she'd suggest, watching me yawn through dinner. I can make you some chamomile tea. It helps with sleep quality. I accepted gratefully. The tea was slightly bitter, but I figured that was just the herbs. I'd drink it, feel myself getting drowsy within 20 minutes, and barely make it to my bedroom before unconsciousness pulled me under. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who offer comfort while they're hunting you. Then the memory gap started. I'd wake up in my bed with no recollection of getting there. I'd be wearing different pajamas than I'd put on. My alarm would be turned off when I always kept it on. My bedroom door would be open when I distinctly remembered closing it. One morning, I woke up at 11 a.m. and panicked. I'd missed my entire morning at work. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my supervisor. I'd slept through them all, through my alarm, through everything. When I called back, apologetic and confused, my supervisor was concerned. "Are you feeling okay? You've seemed really fatigued lately." Had I? I couldn't remember. The last week was a blur of exhaustion and fragmented sleep. My roommate was sympathetic when I told her what happened. "Stress can do that," she said knowingly. "Your body might be forcing you to rest. Are you drinking enough water? Eating properly? Sometimes vitamin deficiencies can cause severe fatigue." She started making me smoothies in the morning, making sure I ate breakfast, preparing coffee for me before work. I was grateful for her care, even as the exhaustion worsened. I started losing chunks of time. I'd be at my desk at work, and suddenly it would be 2 hours later with no memory of what I'd done. I'd find notes in my handwriting I didn't remember writing. My internship supervisor pulled me aside, concerned. "Is everything okay? You seem out of it lately. You fell asleep in the meeting yesterday." I fell asleep in a meeting. For about 20 minutes. "We tried to wake you, but you were really out. Maybe you should see a doctor." I couldn't afford a doctor. I just needed to make it through the summer. But the symptoms kept getting worse. The breaking point came when I missed a critical evaluation meeting, one that would determine whether I'd get a return offer after graduation. I'd set 3 alarms, asked my roommate to make sure I was up, done everything right. But I woke up at 3 p.m. groggy and disoriented to a dozen missed calls and texts. My internship coordinator was furious. My chance at a return offer was gone. I sat in my room crying, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. That's when I started paying attention to patterns. The exhaustion was always worse after my roommate made me something to eat or drink. The memory gaps correlated with evenings when she'd prepared dinner or made tea. The mornings I woke up confused were always mornings after she'd brought me water to stay hydrated. Your body knows when something is wrong before your mind accepts it. I started being careful. I'd accept the drinks she made, but pour them down the sink when she wasn't looking. I'd claim I'd already eaten when she offered food. And I noticed. The exhaustion started to lift. The memory gaps became less frequent. My mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. But I needed proof. One evening, she made tea for both of us. "Chamomile and lavender," she said, handing me a mug. "You've seemed stressed. This will help you sleep." "Thank you," I said, accepting the mug. I sat on the couch, pretending to sip it while watching TV. The moment she went to the bathroom, I poured the entire thing into the plant next to the couch. When she came back, I faked a few yawns, made a show of finishing the tea, and announced I was going to bed early. "Sleep well," she said with a smile that suddenly looked different to me. Predatory. I went to my room, changed into pajamas, and lay down on top of my covers. But I didn't sleep. I positioned myself carefully, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. Waiting. 45 minutes later, I heard my door open. The soft footsteps approaching my bed. The click of a camera phone. I stayed still, fighting every instinct to move, to confront her. Through barely slitted eyes, I could see her standing over me, phone out, taking photos from different angles. She adjusted my position slightly, moving my arm, tilting my head, staging the shots. She took at least a dozen photos before leaving, pulling the door closed. Behind her. The moment she was gone, I grabbed my own phone and started researching. Private forums, medical documentation sites, places where people posted unconscious photos with clinical notes. It didn't take long to find her profile. Dozens of photos of me posted over the past 6 weeks. Each one labeled with notes. Benzodiazepine, 3 mg, onset 20 minutes, duration 8 hours. Subject shows increased tolerance, adjusted to 4 mg. Memory impairment confirmed, subject unaware of photos being taken. I felt sick. She'd been using me as a research subject, documenting the effects of sedatives on an unwilling, unknowing participant, testing dosages, recording responses, treating me like a lab rat. I left the apartment immediately, went straight to the emergency room and explained everything. The blood test came back positive for benzodiazepines. a significant amount in my system, despite not having taken any medication knowingly. The hospital called the police. My roommate was arrested the next day. They found her stash, bottles of prescription medications stolen from her clinical rotations, detailed logs of when and how she'd administered them to me, and hundreds of photos documenting my unconscious states. She was expelled from her nursing program immediately, charged with assault, drugging, and a list of other crimes. The investigation revealed she'd been doing this as part of some twisted independent research she planned to use for a thesis on medication effects. My internship was over. There was no recovering from the meetings I'd missed, the performance issues caused by being systematically drugged. My summer was ruined. My health took months to fully recover. I still have nightmares about being helpless, unconscious, while someone stood over me documenting my vulnerability. The worst part. Her defense attorney tried to argue she'd been helping me by giving me sleep aids because I'd seemed stressed, that it was a misunderstanding of boundaries, not malicious intent. She got 18 months and a permanent ban from any medical or nursing program. It felt like nothing compared to what she'd done. I can't drink tea anymore, can't accept food from people I don't completely trust. I check every drink for that bitter taste, even though I know it's paranoia. Because I learned the hardest way possible that the people who offer to take care of you, who insist on helping, who position themselves as caregivers, sometimes they're the most dangerous ones of all, and sometimes the person poisoning you is the one bringing you medicine with a smile. I found the apartment listing on a cold Tuesday in February, desperate to move out of my parents' house and finally have some independence. The rent was suspiciously cheap for the area, a converted Victorian house split into 4 units, mine being the second floor. The previous tenant had left suddenly, and the landlord seemed eager to fill it quickly. There was a roommate situation, but the landlord assured me he was very quiet, keeps to himself. You'll barely know he's there. That should have been my first red flag. But I was 23, broke, and desperate for my own space. My roommate's bedroom door was closed when I moved in. It stayed closed, for days, then weeks. I'd hear occasional sounds, footsteps, a door opening and closing, water running in the shared bathroom, but I never actually saw him. Notes would appear on the kitchen counter. Took $20 from grocery fund for supplies. Please keep noise down after 10 p.m. Do not enter my room for any reason. I respected his privacy. Some people are just introverted, I told myself. Maybe he worked from home, had social anxiety, preferred solitude. It was weird, sure, but it wasn't hurting me. The apartment was otherwise perfect. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, plenty of space. I could deal with a reclusive roommate. Then I started hearing things at night. Movement in the walls. Not mice. I knew what mice sounded like. This was heavier, more deliberate. Creaking and shuffling that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves, traveling from one end of the apartment to the other. Sometimes above me, in the ceiling, like someone walking slowly overhead. Old house settling, the landlord said when I called. These Victorian houses are over 100 years old. The wood expands and contracts with temperature changes, completely normal. But it didn't sound normal. It sounded like footsteps, like someone moving through spaces that shouldn't exist. The architecture of old houses can hide more than just dust and memories. Sometimes it hides people. I started noticing food disappearing faster than made sense. I'd buy groceries for 2 people, accounting for my consumption and my roommate's share. But we'd run out too quickly. A full box of cereal gone in 2 days. An entire package of bread vanishing overnight. 6 eggs missing when I'd only used 2. My roommate never came out to eat. I never saw him cooking, never found dirty dishes from him, never caught him in the kitchen. So where was all the food going? Strange smells started coming through the ventilation. Musty, stale air mixed with something organic and unpleasant. Body odor mixed with old fabric and mildew. The smell would be strongest in the evening, wafting through the vents, in my bedroom and bathroom. I mentioned it to my roommate via note slipped under his door. Hey, have you noticed a weird smell coming through the vents? Might be something in the ducts. No response, just more silence from behind his always locked door. One night, I heard him leave. The telltale sound of his bedroom door opening and closing, footsteps in the hallway, the apartment door shutting. I knew I shouldn't invade his privacy, but curiosity and growing unease pushed me forward. I needed to understand what was going on. His bedroom door was locked, but the old house had skeleton keys that worked on multiple doors. I found one that fit. The room was almost empty. A mattress on the floor, a desk, a single lamp. But the walls were covered in posters and artwork, densely layered, overlapping. And behind one of the posters, when I lifted the corner, I found a hole, deliberately drilled, about 3 inches in diameter, leading directly into my bathroom wall. My stomach dropped. I started checking behind other posters. More holes, some looking into my bedroom, some into shared spaces, some that seemed to lead into the walls themselves, into spaces that shouldn't be accessible. I got out of his room immediately, heart pounding, and started examining my own walls more carefully. That's when I found them in my bathroom. Small holes, perfectly positioned behind the towel rack and wall-mounted mirror. Someone had been watching me. For how long? I called the landlord, panicked. There are holes drilled in the walls. My roommate has been spying on me through the walls. That's a serious accusation. I'll need to come look at this. He arrived the next morning with a maintenance worker. They confirmed the holes, their faces growing increasingly concerned. We need to check the attic, the landlord said quietly. These old houses have crawl spaces between floors. If he's been drilling through walls. We went up the narrow attic stairs, a door I'd never thought to open, assuming it was landlord-only access. What we found made my blood run cold. A living space. An actual makeshift apartment constructed in the attic. A mattress, blankets, battery-powered lanterns, stacks of food. My food, food from other tenants in the building. A milk crate full of personal items that didn't belong to him. My favorite coffee mug I thought I'd lost. A book I'd been searching for. Photos from my room. Clothing items I'd assumed were misplaced in laundry. And notebooks. Dozens of notebooks filled with observations about everyone in the building. My schedule, my habits, what time I showered, what I ate, who visited me. Similar notes about the other tenants. Floor plans of the entire building with notations marking where he'd created access points. Privacy is an illusion when someone's willing to physically dismantle the barriers that create it. He'd been living in the walls, not just his bedroom, actually inside the structure of the house, moving through crawl spaces and gaps he'd created, watching all of us like specimens in a terrarium. The maintenance worker found the modifications he'd made, places where he'd removed sections of wall from inside the attic, creating passages between floors. He could access almost anywhere in the building without being seen. The sounds I'd been hearing weren't the house settling. They were him, crawling through the spaces between walls, above ceilings, below floors. We left the attic, and I immediately went back to my apartment to pack. I couldn't stay there another night. As I was throwing clothes into a suitcase, I heard it, a creak directly above my bedroom ceiling. I froze, looked up, and saw it, an eye, looking down at me through a tiny hole in the ceiling I'd never noticed because of the textured plaster pattern. An eye that blinked and moved, tracking my movement across the room. I screamed and ran out of the apartment, calling 911 from the hallway. The police came within minutes. They called up to the attic, ordering him down. He refused. Barricaded himself up there, using furniture and boards he'd apparently been storing. For 6 hours, they negotiated while more officers arrived, while the other tenants were evacuated, while I sat in a police car, shaking uncontrollably. When they finally got him out, they found the full extent of his modifications. He'd created a network of passages through the walls, not just in our unit, but connecting to other apartments in the building. He'd been accessing all 4 units through the walls, watching everyone, taking things, living in the hidden spaces like a parasite in the building's bones. The building was condemned. The structural modifications he'd made had compromised the integrity of the 100-year-old house. Everyone had to move out immediately. He was arrested, evaluated psychiatrically, and eventually convicted on multiple charges including burglary, stalking, and criminal mischief. I learned later he'd been doing this for over 2 years, long before I moved in. The previous tenant who'd left suddenly, she discovered what he was doing and fled without even bothering to break her lease properly. I lost my deposit, my sense of security, and months of sleep. I still can't live in old buildings, can't handle creaking sounds at night. I check every wall in any apartment I view, looking for anomalies, for holes, for signs that the spaces aren't as solid as they appear. Because I learned that walls aren't always barriers. Sometimes they're just suggestions, and sometimes the person you think is living next door is actually living everywhere, all around you, in the spaces you can't see. I was so proud of myself when I got the job offer. My first real professional position, relocating to a new city, finally starting my career. The company had a corporate housing group where employees could connect for roommate situations, and that's how I found him. Another young professional, working in finance, well-dressed, articulate. We met for coffee and he seemed perfect. Stable income, clean background check through the housing group, good references. The apartment was in a nice building with a doorman, underground parking, modern amenities. Split 2 ways, it was actually affordable on my entry-level salary. I signed the lease, feeling like my adult life was finally beginning. The first month was completely normal. We'd occasionally chat in the kitchen, coordinate on cleaning, keep different schedules so we rarely overlapped. He worked long hours, often coming home late, sometimes having early morning meetings. Standard corporate lifestyle. I was doing the same, trying to prove myself at my new job. Then the visitors started. People would come by at odd hours, 10 p.m., midnight, sometimes 2 a.m. I'd hear the door buzzer, hear him talking to someone in the living room for 15 or 20 minutes. Then they'd leave. He never introduced me to any of them. If I emerged from my room during one of these visits, he'd give me a tight smile and say, "Work colleague," or "old friend," without offering details. When someone's life doesn't add up, the pieces they're hiding are usually the ones that matter most. It happened too frequently to be normal social visits. 3 or 4 times a week, always brief, always late. And the people never looked like work colleagues. They looked rough, nervous, checking over their shoulders as they entered the building. I tried to convince myself it was none of my business. Maybe he was a consultant with weird hours. Maybe he had a side business. Maybe he was just more social than me. I focused on my own job and tried not to think about it. Then I found the money. It was November, and I'd pulled out my winter coat for the first time that season. As I put my hand in the pocket, I felt something thick. A rubber-banded stack of $100 bills. Thousands of dollars, just sitting in my coat pocket. My hand shook as I counted it. $4,000. In my coat. In my closet. I confronted him immediately. "There's money in my coat. A lot of money. Why is there money in my coat?" He barely looked up from his laptop. "Oh, sorry about that. I needed a safe place to stash some cash temporarily. You weren't using that coat yet. I'll take it back." "You can't just put money in my stuff without asking." "It's just cash. What's the problem?" I said I'm sorry. He took the stack from me and disappeared into his room. But it was a problem. A big problem. Because who hides thousands of dollars in someone else's coat? Who even has that much cash lying around? I started paying more attention. Started noticing things I'd been too busy or too trusting to see before. The visitors weren't just frequent. They were transactional. Quick handoffs at the door. Something exchanged in a brief handshake or passed in a bag. My roommate always positioning himself between them and the interior of the apartment, like he was protecting something. One morning, I dropped my toothbrush behind my bathroom sink. When I got down on my hands and knees to retrieve it, I saw something taped to the underside of the sink cabinet. A package, sealed in plastic secured with duct tape. My heart was racing as I peeled it off. Pills. Hundreds of pills in clear baggies stamped with logos I didn't recognize. This wasn't prescription medication. This was something else. I put it back exactly as I'd found it, my mind spiraling. My roommate was dealing drugs from our apartment, using our apartment as a storage facility, and he'd hidden product in my bathroom, in my space, without my knowledge. I needed to move out, immediately, but I had 6 months left on the lease and couldn't afford to break it. I started looking for sublets, for ways to get out without destroying my finances. That's when I noticed the cars, unmarked sedans parked across the street, same ones showing up multiple days in a row. People sitting in them for hours, watching our building. I'd leave for work and feel eyes on me. I'd come home and see someone in a car tracking my movement. Paranoia feels different when you realize it's not paranoia at all. It's awareness. One day, a man approached me in the parking garage. "You live in 4B. Who are you?" "Just asking a question. You live there, right? With your roommate?" "I'm not answering that." I got in my car, locked the doors immediately, and drove away. He'd been following me, watching me, because of whatever my roommate was involved in. I came home that night and told my roommate about the cars, about being approached. "People are watching our apartment. Someone followed me. What the hell have you gotten me involved in?" "You're being paranoid. There's drugs in my bathroom. There was cash in my coat. People are watching us." "Keep your voice down," he hissed, suddenly intense. "You don't know what you're talking about. Just mind your business and everything will be fine." But everything wasn't fine. 2 weeks later, at 5:07 a.m., I woke up to pounding on the door and someone yelling, "Police! Search warrant!" I stumbled out of bed in my pajamas, disoriented and terrified. The door burst open. They'd used a battering ram. Officers flooded into the apartment, armed, wearing tactical gear, shouting commands. "Hands where we can see them. Get on the ground. Now!" I dropped to my knees, hands up, shaking uncontrollably. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. They zip-tied my hands behind my back and left me on the floor while they tore the apartment apart. They found everything. Pills hidden in air vents, behind outlet covers, taped under furniture, stacks of cash in the walls, a ledger detailing transactions, scales and packaging materials, and the worst part, they found product hidden in my spaces. In my bathroom, my closet, my storage boxes, places I accessed regularly but hadn't thought to look. "That's not mine," I kept saying. "I didn't know. That's my roommate's stuff." But they didn't believe me. Why would they? It was in my spaces, my belongings. Of course I knew. Of course I was involved. They arrested both of us, took us to the station in separate cars, put me in an interrogation room for 12 hours, while they verified my story, checked my finances, interviewed my employer, background checked every aspect of my life. "He was using you," the detective finally said. "Using your spaces to hide product in case we searched his room. If we'd only found stuff in his areas, he'd take the fall. But by planting it in yours, he had plausible deniability. He could claim it was yours or shared. You were his insurance policy. I'd been used, manipulated, put at risk of federal drug charges because I'd trusted someone from a corporate housing group. They released me after confirming I had no unexplained income, no connection to his suppliers, no knowledge of his operation. But the damage was done. My arrest record existed, even though I wasn't charged. Background checks would show I'd been arrested in a drug raid. My employer was understanding, but I could see the doubt in my manager's eyes. I didn't get the promotion I'd been working toward. Future job applications flagged my record, requiring explanations that made me sound guilty even when I was innocent. My roommate cut a deal, testified against his suppliers, and entered witness protection. I lived in fear for months that his associates would think I'd cooperated too, that I'd be targeted for retaliation. Every car that drove too slowly past me, every person who looked at me too long, sent me into panic. I moved cities again, started over, paid a lawyer thousands to help document my innocence for future employment verification, all because I'd trusted someone who seemed professional, who came recommended through legitimate channels, who wore a suit and talked about market trends while he built a drug operation around me. You can never truly know who you're living with, and sometimes, by the time you figure it out, you're already complicit in ways you never chose to be. That's the real crime. Not just what they did, but how they made their crimes your burden to carry. I needed a roommate fast. My previous roommate had gotten a job offer across the country and moved out with only 2 weeks' notice, leaving me responsible for the full rent unless I could find a replacement quickly. I posted in local housing groups, and she responded within hours. Professional photos, articulate messages, stable job, good credit. When we met, she seemed perfectly normal, friendly, clean, responsible. She mentioned she'd just ended a long-term relationship and was looking for a fresh start. It was mutual, she said. We just grew apart. You know how it goes. I didn't know how it goes, but I nodded sympathetically and handed her the lease to sign. She moved in that weekend. The first few days were fine. We established a routine, split chores, coordinated schedules. Then he showed up. I came home from work on a Thursday to find a man sitting on our couch, eating chips, and watching TV like he owned the place. He looked up when I entered but didn't introduce himself, didn't explain his presence, just nodded, and went back to the screen. Hello, I said. My roommate emerged from her bedroom. Oh, that's just my ex. He stopped by. Your ex? Yeah, he still has a key from when we were together. I keep asking for it back, but you know how exes can be. Clingy. She rolled her eyes theatrically. The guy didn't react to this characterization, didn't seem hurt or defensive, just kept eating chips. Maybe you should change the locks, I suggested. I will. He's leaving soon anyway, right? She directed this at him. Yeah, in a bit, he said casually. But he didn't leave for another 3 hours, and he was back 2 days later, then 4 times the next week, then nearly every day. Red flags look different when someone's actively waving them while telling you not to worry. He'd show up at all hours, midday when she was at work, and I was working from home, early evenings, weekends. He'd make himself food from our groceries, use our bathroom, lounge on our furniture. He treated our apartment like his personal hangout space. I'm so sorry, my roommate kept saying. He won't leave me alone. I've told him we're done, but he doesn't respect boundaries. I'm trying to handle it. But her handling it looked a lot like welcoming him in every time he showed up. She never called the police, never changed the locks, never seemed genuinely upset about his presence. If anything, they seemed comfortable together, familiar in a way that didn't match her story of a clean breakup and unwanted ex. He started making comments about me, about my appearance when I'd come home from the gym, about my work schedule, about the dates I'd go on. Going out again? You sure date a lot. Must be looking for something. Said with a smirk that made my skin crawl. Stop commenting on my life, I told him directly. Just making conversation. No need to be sensitive. I confronted my roommate. Your ex needs to stop coming here. This is my home too, and I'm not comfortable with him having unlimited access. I know. I'm working on it. He's just going through a hard time right now. Once he gets back on his feet, he'll stop. But he didn't stop. He escalated, started asking personal questions, commenting on who I brought home, making jokes about my belongings, my habits, my choices. Always positioning himself as the insider, the one who belonged there, while I was treated like the intruder in my own apartment. Then I started noticing things were off. My mail had been opened and resealed. My bedroom door would be slightly ajar when I distinctly remembered closing it. Items in my room had been moved. Subtle shifts, but enough to notice if you paid attention. One evening, I came home early from a canceled dinner and heard them talking in the living room. Their voices were casual, friendly, affectionate. Not the tone of an ex and someone trying to get rid of an ex. I stood in the hallway, out of sight, and listened. "She's so uptight," he was saying. "Always complaining." My roommate laughed. "I know. She's making this harder than it needs to be." "Did you find anything we can use?" "Not yet. Her room's pretty clean. No drugs, no lease violations, nothing we can report to the landlord." My stomach dropped. "What about making her uncomfortable enough that she just leaves?" he suggested. "I'm working on it. Give it time. Once she's gone, you can move in officially. No more sneaking around." The moment you realize you're not witnessing their relationship problems, you are their relationship problem. They were working together, planning together. She'd never broken up with him. This whole unwanted ex story was a performance, and I was the target. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Got 3 more minutes of them discussing strategies to drive me out. How he'd been going through my things, looking for anything problematic. How they'd been planning to stage incidents that would make me look like a bad tenant. How they were just waiting for me to either leave voluntarily or give them ammunition to force me out. I stayed at a friend's place that night and went to the landlord first thing in the morning with the recording. His face darkened as he listened. "She told me you were the problem tenant. Said you were hostile to guests, unreasonable about visitors, creating a hostile living environment." "She's been building a false narrative," I said. "So when they finally make their move, you'd believe her version." The landlord pulled her lease and found she'd violated multiple terms. Unauthorized long-term guest, harassment, attempting to sublet without permission. He started eviction proceedings immediately. But she didn't go quietly. She and her boyfriend escalated, making my last month in that apartment hell. Loud noises at night. Accidentally unplugging my food in the fridge. Taking my packages. Making complaints to neighbors that I was the problem. I had to change the locks on my bedroom. Decor at my own expense. Had to file a police report for harassment when the boyfriend showed up and pounded on the apartment door for 20 minutes, screaming threats. Had to document everything in case it escalated further. She was finally evicted, but not before trying to damage my reputation with neighbors, leaving negative reviews about me on roommate sites, and attempting to get the landlord to hold me responsible for damages she'd caused. The boyfriend disappeared after that. Apparently, without her place to crash, he lost interest in the whole situation, confirming what I'd suspected. They were using me from the beginning, a placeholder to cover rent until they could force me out, and he could move in without going through proper channels or paying his fair share. I lived alone for 6 months after that, paying the full rent myself, because I couldn't risk another roommate situation. Couldn't trust my judgment. Couldn't handle the vulnerability of sharing space with someone who might be running a long con. The worst part wasn't the eviction drama or the harassment. It was realizing how completely I'd been played, how every interaction had been calculated, every argument staged, every moment of her frustration with him carefully performed for my benefit. I'd thought I was living with someone going through a breakup. Instead, I was living in the middle of someone's scheme, cast as the obstacle they needed to remove. And sometimes the most dangerous roommate isn't the one with problems. It's the one who makes you the problem while positioning themselves as the victim. That kind of manipulation doesn't just violate your space. It violates your ability to trust your own perception of reality. And that damage lasts long after the locks are changed. I was thrilled to get into the graduate program. It meant relocating across the country, diving into intensive research, and living in graduate housing with other international and out-of-state students. My assigned roommate was an international student from overseas, pursuing his doctorate in engineering, When we met, he was soft-spoken, polite, incredibly studious. He'd spend 12-hour days in the lab, come home exhausted, eat a simple dinner, and go to bed early. The perfect roommate for someone equally focused on academics. He mentioned the sleepwalking during our first week living together. I should tell you, I sometimes sleepwalk. It's harmless, been doing it since childhood. If you see me wandering at night, just ignore me. I'll go back to bed on my own. Does it happen often? I asked. Not really. Maybe once a month. My family's used to it. I appreciated the heads up. Sleepwalking wasn't that unusual. My cousin had done it as a kid. No big deal. The first time I encountered it, I handled it exactly as he'd suggested. I'd gotten up around 2 a.m. for water and found him standing in the living room, facing the wall, eyes open but glassy and unfocused. I quietly got my water and went back to bed, leaving him standing there. In the morning, he had no memory of it. Classic sleepwalking, he said when I mentioned it. Sorry if it freaked you out. It happened again 2 weeks later. This time he was in the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets slowly, methodically. His eyes were open, his movements deliberate but somehow off, too slow, too measured. I watched for a minute, then went back to my room. Again, no memory of it the next day. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who give you a reason to ignore the warning signs. But the episodes started becoming more frequent. Once a week, then twice a week, then almost nightly. And they were changing, evolving. I'd wake up to find him standing in my doorway, just standing there, silhouetted against the hallway light, staring into my dark room. His eyes would be open, seeming to track my movements when I'd shift in bed, but he'd claim to be asleep. You were in my doorway again last night, I'd tell him in the morning. Was I? I'm so sorry. The sleepwalking's been worse lately. Stress from my dissertation, probably. One night I woke up and he was holding a kitchen knife. Just standing in the living room, knife in his hand, eyes open, swaying slightly. My heart nearly stopped. I approached carefully. Hey, you're sleepwalking. You need to put the knife down. He didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear me. I got closer and gently tried to take the knife from his hand. His grip tightened. Then suddenly he blinked, looked at me, looked at the knife, and his expression shifted to confused horror. What? Why do I have this? Was I sleepwalking? Yes. You need to see a doctor. This is getting dangerous. I will. I promise. I'm so sorry. I would never hurt anyone consciously. But he never went to a doctor, and the episodes continued. I started locking my bedroom door at night, started sleeping less soundly, always half aware, waiting for the sound of footsteps or my door handle turning. The lock held, but knowing he was testing it, trying to get in while supposedly asleep, made rest impossible. Items in my room would be different when I woke up. A book moved from my desk to my dresser. My laptop closed when I'd left it open. My closet door ajar. Small changes that I couldn't definitively prove were from him entering, but that felt wrong, felt like violations. Did you come in my room last night? I'd ask. I don't think so, but if I was sleepwalking, I might not remember. You should keep your door locked. I do keep it locked. Then I couldn't have gotten in. He'd smile, but something in his eyes felt aware. Too aware. I started researching sleepwalking. Everything I read said sleepwalkers don't typically open locked doors, don't show complex problem solving, don't exhibit purposeful behavior. But he was doing all of those things. The line between unconscious behavior and calculated malice is thinner than we want to believe, and sometimes it doesn't exist at all. The episodes became more aggressive. One night, I woke up to him shaking my shoulder roughly. When I gasped and jerked awake, he stumbled back, and then woke up, confused and apologetic. But I'd seen his face in that first moment, fully aware, fully present, before he'd switched into his confused act. You're not really asleep during these episodes, I said the next morning. You need to move out or I will. "I can't control it," he insisted. "It's a medical condition. You can't discriminate against me for a medical condition." He was right about the legal aspect. The graduate housing office said, unless he posed a verified threat, I couldn't force him out, and he couldn't be evicted for a medical issue. I'd have to be the one to move if I wanted out. I started looking for alternative housing, but mid-semester options were limited and expensive. I installed a deadbolt on my bedroom door, one that required a key from both sides. I slept with my phone next to my pillow and a can of pepper spray on my nightstand. I lasted 3 more weeks. 3 weeks of increasing dread, of sleepless nights, of catching him outside my door at 3 a.m., testing the handle. 3 weeks of his daytime apologies and nighttime violations. Then came the night that ended it. I woke up struggling to breathe, weight on my chest, pressure on my throat. My eyes flew open and he was there, on top of me, hands wrapped around my neck, squeezing. His eyes were open, looking directly into mine, and they were completely aware. I couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. I clawed at his hands, his face thrashed desperately. My bedroom door was locked from the inside. No one could get in to help me even if I could scream. Black spots were forming in my vision when I managed to knee him hard in the stomach. He loosened his grip just enough for me to buck him off, gasping and choking, scrambling away. And then he woke up, blinked, looked around confused, looked at me cowering against the wall with horror on his face. "What happened? Why are you... Did I sleepwalk into your room? How did I get in here?" But I'd seen it. That split second before he'd performed his confused awakening. His eyes had been fully conscious, fully aware. He'd known exactly what he was doing. And when I'd fought back hard enough, he'd aborted the attack and switched to his sleepwalking defense. "Get out," I whispered, my voice destroyed from the choking. "Get out right now." "I'm so sorry, I don't know what—" "Get out." I called campus police the moment he left my room, packed a bag while they were on their way, took photos of the bruises already forming on my throat, gave a statement while shaking uncontrollably. They questioned him, and he performed his sleepwalking defense perfectly, confused, apologetic, offering to check into a sleep clinic immediately. I stayed with friends that night and never went back. Graduate housing helped me break the lease without penalty given the circumstances. I moved into a studio apartment I could barely afford and dealt with the financial strain rather than risk my life further. That's when I started hearing from others, his previous roommates, 2 other people who'd reported similar experiences, the escalating sleepwalking, the nighttime aggression, the sense that he was fully aware but using the medical excuse as cover. None of them had pressed charges. All of them had just fled. And his family knew. I spoke to one of his previous roommates who'd contacted the university about him. His family had admitted he had problems, but claimed it was sleepwalking, a medical issue, not criminal behavior. They'd moved him from school to school, country to country, housing situation to housing situation, always one step ahead of consequences. I filed a police report, pushed for a proper investigation. But by the time the university took it seriously, he'd withdrawn from the program and returned to his home country, beyond their jurisdiction, beyond consequences. I still have nightmares about waking up to hands around my throat, still sleep with locks on my doors and weapons within reach, still jolt awake at any sound in the night, heart pounding, expecting to see someone standing over me. Because I learned the terrifying truth. Some people will use any excuse, medical conditions, accidents, misunderstandings, to get away with calculated violence. And the scariest monsters aren't the ones who are unconscious of their actions. They're the ones who are fully aware but have perfected the art of pretending they're not. Thanks for listening to these true psycho roommate horror stories. If you survived your own nightmare roommate situation, you're not alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. Disturbing true stories here on Untold Whispers. Stay safe out there and always trust your instincts. Until next time.